What the city is talking about.
The news that impacts you.
Welcome to the Montreal Now podcast.
Came across an article the other day, and it's interesting. This was in the Globe and Mail, and it caught my attention for one very obvious reason. It talked about burnout, and burnout is something we have talked about in the past as Canadians deal with it perhaps more than they have in decades past. But then the really interesting part of this, the part that really stuck out, was the part about rest. Yeah, something as simple as rest, and the fact that apparently most of us simply don't get enough. And in fact, the number's pretty startling. So we wanted to talk about this today. Catherine Roscoe Barr is a lifestyle journalist, the author of a new book called Feel Better Now, and she is on the line. Thank you so much for being here. Let me begin by asking the question. When I said the number's rather startling, it turns out, if I read this right, that on average, right, we get just 17 minutes a day of what we would call actually resting. So let's break this down because that seems kind of nuts.
Yeah, that is a startling number. I think it's so interesting how most of us know we need rest, but we're not getting the rest we need. And that is what I am obsessed with helping people do, is learn to rest. It's actually a skill, I think.
You know, it's funny. You think that that's the least thing you'd need a skill for, is learning to basically do nothing or just rest. But it seems that we take every waking moment, and the numbers show it, to be doing something. And obviously that's not really helping us rest.
No, not at all. And I think, we fill our time with so many things that don't help us recover. And that's what I'm really interested in. I'm a neuroscience-based wellness coach, and I really think okay, what would help my nervous system come back into regulation so I can enjoy my experience of life and show up as a well-rested version of me.
Well, so let's deal with that, because I'm reading and seeing the article. It says things like being in nature, bird watching, camping, etc. That doesn't necessarily count for rest, or does it? That's active rest versus passive rest. Is there a difference?
Yes. There's many different kinds of rest. Exactly like you said, there's passive rest, there's active rest. It's when we can kind of check out from things that are stressful to us and check into things that are relaxing, whether we are moving our body, whether we are still. And the thing that I find really helpful is to think of it in the flexible framework, like 1 minute of pausing and reflecting and noticing nature and taking a deep breath or having a hug from someone you love. That can really help you recover and feel rested.
Which is interesting, of course, because a lot of time now is spent what people think is resting, looking at a video screen. The same story, by the way, and this is, again, just as crazy as the fact that we only get 17 minutes of what we would call real rest. Canadians spend, on average, an hour and 42 minutes each day staring at various screens, which in and of itself is a bit disturbing, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I actually thought the number would be higher. That number, when I read the article, startled me because I felt like it would be higher. You know, when I'm out at the grocery store, in the lineup at the bus, or, anywhere, I just see people on their phones, and that actually can elicit the stress response in our body, and we want the opposite. We want to do things that elicit the recovery response. And so I think, all of this can be helped by a mindfulness practice. And all that means is just noticing how things make you feel in your body, and then choosing things that for yourself help you truly relax and recover.
Can you explain that if you could? So someone's sitting at home, end of the day, and you're on your phone and you're scrolling through TikTok or Instagram or whatever else. And some people might say, well, that's relaxing for me. Maybe there's some stuff on there that's made you laugh, or, basically some sort of emotion that comes into play in seeing something. Why does that not qualify as rest?
Well, part of it is just that it can increase cortisol in our body. The light, when the sun is beginning to set, that's sort of more red light spectrum, and blue light, which is what screens emit, can increase our cortisol. And so even if it feels relaxing, something different can be going on in our body. And it also depends what we're reading. Is something stirring us emotionally? Is it making us feel jealous of what someone else has, or like we're not enough, or, that it's the bad news in the world? And I think all of these are external things. I think really tuning in and pausing and asking yourself what you need to feel rested, you will always get the correct answer, and then you just need to follow those breadcrumbs.
So if it's this difficult, as the numbers show, for Canadians to actually go ahead and get that, pure rest, that rest that everyone needs, what are some tips on saying to yourself, okay, I know I need to do this? And as you mentioned off the top, the funny part is you'd think this would be easy to do, not hard to do, right? When you're asking someone, okay, forget about work, turn it off, forget about, family, whatever, just for a few minutes. How do you get yourself into that frame of mind? What's the best way to do it?
One of the best tools I teach my clients is retrospect. That when we aren't mindful and things sort of numb us, we're busy, we're stressed, and we just distracting ourselves sometimes feels restful, but it's not. But if we can just pause and say, what do I know makes me feel well rested? And, that's things like nature and spending time with people you love and maybe reading or journaling or reflecting or having a bath or enjoying a cup of tea. It's the things that allow your mind to relax, but also your body and especially your nervous system. And so I think, knowing little basic things like that in your body and really just tuning in can show you what really helps you rest.
And is it helpful, or do you tell clients, it's almost like an appointment, right? You have to say to yourself at a certain point, I am going to actively now try to get that rest. Can you do that? Can you make it an appointment?
I think so. I have what I call AM and PM rituals, and I really encourage my clients to do those. And so I know at the end of the day, I need a period of time to wind down before I can even sleep, and that's part of rest. And so I ask myself, what helps me wind down? And that's disconnecting from bad news and emails and blue light and, too much food or drink and those sorts of things. And, it's different for everybody. And so that's the fun part is it's almost like a menu. Ooh, what's my relaxation menu? What can I choose from even in little bits, like 1 minute here and there? We are so busy, and that's, just like a bigger question of how can we as a society celebrate rest and create workspaces and communities where rest is encouraged and prioritized. But I think when you just ask yourself, what are the minute by minute things I can do to recover, it can make a really big difference in your life and the way you show up.
How's falling asleep in front of the TV?
Not good.
Okay, well, not good. Okay, thought I'd ask.
No, not good. Sorry.
That's okay. Asking for a friend. Then I would simply ask as well, and I like to think I'm a pretty good napper. I think it's one of those things you develop, with the kind of schedule you have. And so that part's okay. Sometimes I think, and someone else mentioned this to me as well, simply closing your eyes and doing nothing else, just that is a good way to start.
Yes, because you can rest your senses. You can rest your hearing, your vision. Those are things that are just so stimulated, especially now because of all the screens in our life, that, just literally, sometimes I'll just go into a dark room for 5 minutes and just have silence and darkness and just breathe. And that 5 minutes can feel like a 2-hour nap sometimes.
All right. Some great tips. The book is called Feel Better Now. Catherine Roscoe Barr, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Bringing you the breaking news and the people making it. Montreal Now with Aaron Rand. CJAD 800.
So in the wake of that terrible plane crash in Toronto, that Delta plane that ended up on its roof, of course, and thankfully everyone managed to get out. Nobody was, there were injuries, but I think of the 21 people, latest update, that were injured, 20 have already been released from hospital. There was no loss of life. And then today we find out from Delta, their plane, that they are going to offer now, or are offering, $30,000 US to passengers on that plane that crashed at Pearson, with a company spokesperson saying the money has, quote, no strings attached and does not affect rights, unquote. So the question then becomes, do you take the $30,000 and walk away and that's the end of it? Or, when it comes to passenger rights, and there would be rights specifically involved in something like this, what does happen? Gabor Lukacs is president. And we've spoken, by the way, before. I should mention that here on the show, right, to Gabor Lukacs, president of Air Passenger Rights. He is on the line. Gabor, thank you for the time. So let's get into this. $30,000 is the offer. Does that seem reasonable?
Good afternoon. It's good to be with you. $30,000 is I would say it's a good start. If you did not sustain any physical injuries, you may want to consider just taking it and calling it a day. If you did sustain any kind of physical injury, I would have a second look at it. Either case, you may want to seek legal advice from a trained lawyer. This is not just a small claims court matter. This is not just a broken baggage issue. This is a serious amount of money, serious legal consequences. So I would, on this occasion, urge every affected passenger to seek legal advice from trained legal professional who has actually experience and knowledge with the Montreal Convention, not just any lawyer, but somebody who is familiar with the Montreal Convention.
Gabor, would this matter as to locale? So the plane crashed in Toronto, but it left from the U.S. Would that matter as far as you know where the obligation here is?
The obligations are governed by an international treaty called the Montreal Convention, to which both Canada and the U.S. are signatories. So the only question that arises here, and that's again governed by the Montreal Convention, is where the passenger can sue. They can sue in the state where the airline is domiciled, to the U.S., in a state where the ticket was bought, and the state of final destination, which for many but not all passengers may be Canada. So there are questions of where the passenger may sue, but the rights of the passengers, if the Montreal Convention is interpreted correctly, are supposed to be the same no matter in which country you sue, because that's the whole point of the Montreal Convention, is to create some kind of uniformity among all countries, to have all same rules for accidental death and injury of passengers.
So let me ask, do we have anything to compare this to? Because obviously, you're going to look for precedent of some kind. Here you have everybody surviving. Do you know of a situation similar to this, and what would have happened there, or what did happen?
I cannot think of a comparator, and I don't think I would look at it through simply the lens of a comparator. I would just suggest to look at the case itself on its merits, on what happened, and I would also perhaps, before deciding whether to seek more than $30,000, I would want to see some information about what actually happened, why this accident happened.
Okay, well, that's interesting. So we know that's going to take a while. That could be weeks, it could be months. And then based on what we find out then, why would that change anything? Because someone would be at fault, perhaps?
Well, if there's some other party at fault, then there's nothing wrong with taking $30,000 if it is clear in the paperwork that there are not really no strings attached. But the question is, okay, I have now $30,000. What do I do next? Do I still pursue somebody else?
Right.
Do I pursue the airline? Do I pursue the airport? Do I pursue whoever other else, maybe the aircraft manufacturer? I'm just tossing ideas. I'm not saying that any of these people are guilty of anything, but hypothetically, these are potential defendants. So you ask those questions, and ultimately, you will know more once you see the report of what caused the accident. My knee-jerk reaction would be, if you didn't have a physical injury, it would be a more challenging battle to get more compensation under the Montreal Convention. There is a recent 2022 case from Ontario Superior Court that at least opens the door to psychological damages, which in the past have been rejected under the Montreal Convention in the case of accidents. So there is a little bit of opening there, putting the leg in the door, but it would really take a lawyer who is very familiar with the legal system and with the Montreal Convention specifically to actually make it not just a leg in the door with actual compensation if you didn't have an actual physical injury, bodily injury. If you were injured, if among those who were injured, then it is an easier situation. Even then, I would suggest you consult a personal injury lawyer who is an expert both in Montreal Convention and in personal injury to see what amount of compensation is reasonable based on the case law.
It's funny, to what you just said now, you're talking about physical injury. We don't know necessarily the extent. We know everyone's out of a hospital now, but with respect to psychological injury here, I don't think it's a big stretch to assume that some of these people who had to go through this are either never going to want to fly again, or, there is some trauma associated with this, I guess, as
obviously,
well, right?
Obviously.
But
obviously there's trauma. The problem is that, say, 20 years ago, such psychological damages were explicitly rejected by courts who were interpreting the Warsaw Convention, and that has become kind of the case law to some degree also for the Montreal Convention. So there's a recent one case from Ontario which says, well, current modern times, we don't really distinguish that way, the physical injury from psychological injury. They're both part of our body that's being injured. So there is some opening there that a good lawyer could then build up an argument on, but it is not a slam dunk. While if you did have a physical injury, then the only question is how much, because liability would be beyond question at that point.
So from what you've seen so far, and I think we all, I think for the most part agree that once this happened, everyone did the job they were supposed to do about as good as it could be done, right? From the flight attendants to the crew on the ground at Pearson Airport. You agree with that?
The fact that people got out alive is really a good sign. I cannot opine on did what? It's very encouraging, but that's why we have the TSB, the Transportation Safety Board, to investigate. And on its face, I cannot see any obvious error by anybody after the accident happened. I think I would agree with that. There's no obvious thing that sticks out. However, I don't want to preempt the findings of the TSB. I respect that body, and they should be reporting on what they find.
I would just ask with respect to Delta, and again, I think a lot of people wondered how long this would take. Delta acted pretty quickly, and the fact that they offered the money beyond that and simply said there are no strings attached, I was impressed by that as well. We spend a lot of time criticizing airlines. How do you feel in this particular case Delta acted?
My understanding is that in the U.S. it's kind of required. At least that's what I've been reading up. That at least in case of death, there's a requirement. In case of injury, there's a strong expectation. Some airlines actually even have some terms and conditions to that effect in their contract. Mm-hmm. So in the U.S. it's quite common to do what they did. It is still great. It was an honorable thing to do for sure after the accident, and I commend Delta for acting so quickly. Having said that, in such situations, it is not uncommon to act this very, very, very quickly.
I would ask one last thing. With respect to, and I think someone has suggested the idea that we're talking 76 passengers here. Is there the possibility, from what you believe, of a class action suit, or is this all going to be people independently going after the airline for whatever it is they're going after?
It's an interesting question, and I'm not sure if I will go into speculation. 76 is a bit small number in many cases for class action. There's also the question that liability is established by the Montreal Convention. Montreal Convention creates an absolute liability up to 282,000 Canadian dollars. So liability will not be a common question because it's predetermined in a way. And the damages themselves will vary depending on what type of injury you sustain. So it may be that still need to be assessed. Honestly, I don't know. I think that class actions have their place in such situations if they can simplify and expedite having a resolution for the matter, because we don't want 76 different legal proceedings about the same accident. It's not a good use of valuable judicial resources. So it might, but I would hope that airlines will just settle. That's about it. I mean,
like best case scenario. Okay, I got it. Gabor, I want to thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for the time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, of course. Gabor Lukacs, president of Air Passenger Rights, on what happens next with that Delta situation.
The very latest news, reported and discussed. Welcome back to Montreal Now on CJAD 800.
Time to check in with Carmi Levy, take a look at the week in tech. He's CTV's tech analyst. Carmi, I have to start with this story on GameStop. So for people who perhaps are not that familiar, GameStop, Canadian operations, they're pretty much an international company, right? So you go in there, you can buy a video game. GameStop's been a pretty big deal for quite a while. And then we find out today that they want to leave Canada. What's the story here?
Yeah, they got just over 200 stores in Canada, probably one close to you. Certainly my kids spent lots of time in there when they were of a certain age. But the industry has shifted, right? We no longer buy games in boxes, just like we don't buy movies on disc anymore. We subscribe to them, we stream them, we download them. Everything is online, so there really isn't a need to go to a store. And so GameStop has decided that they are going to sell their Canadian and French operations, and they are looking to reduce their retail footprint. We know that the company has been shrinking over the last number of years. Their revenues keep going down for obvious reasons. But what's interesting here is that in announcing that they're going to be bailing on Canada, they said their CEO, Ryan Cohn, posted, "High taxes, liberalism, socialism, progressivism, wokeness, and DEI included at no additional cost if you buy today." So it's basically trying to get us all to look over here, ignore the fact that the company has been mismanaged for the better part of the last decade. So bottom line, if you're looking for a cheap deal on a game, you better shop quickly because those stores are going to disappear pretty fast.
But here's what I don't get. So typically you make financial decisions like that, but in citing what you just said, liberalism, wokeness, and all that, he's making a political statement here specifically about Canada and I guess France, because that's where he wants to shut stores. Is that about the future of his business or about something about operating in those countries specifically?
I think it reflects a growing sense in the tech industry that they are becoming more aligned with the political machinations of the incoming Trump administration.
Okay.
It's pretty clear nobody wants to be on Donald Trump's wrong side. Talk about wokeism and talk about liberalism, and certainly Donald Trump won't put you on blast in his next social media post. And that's really what this is all about. We've seen every major tech company do the same thing. We've seen Mark Zuckerberg and the heads of CEO and Amazon of Google and Amazon and pretty much every other major tech company head over to the White House, head over to Mar-a-Lago, have dinner with Donald Trump to make sure that they're best buddies for the next 4 years. This is just a continuation of that. Doesn't have a heck of a lot to do with business. In fact, it masks the fact that this company has been a loser for a whole bunch of years.
All right, let me move on to talk about Apple. I know they teased an announcement of a new product. Well, the new product's really an old product, but in a different way. What's this new iPhone about?
So if for the last number of years, their least expensive iPhone has been the SE, and that's if you want to buy an iPhone, but you don't want to spend a couple $1,000s on it. And the SE is no longer. They replaced it with something called the iPhone 16e, and it looks a lot more like existing iPhones. So no more Lightning plug. So Lightning is dead. The home button is dead. That was the last device that had both of those features. And what's interesting here, and this isn't going to get a lot of coverage, but it should. This is the first Apple iPhone that uses a modem, the radio, the cellular phone radio inside that moves data on and off the device that Apple built itself. Up until now, they had been contracting with companies like Qualcomm to buy that component. Apple has now developed it themselves, and this is a really big deal because this thing uses a lot less power, 25% less power than other competing modems, which means the battery lasts a lot longer than it did on the earlier versions of the phone, and they're going to be introducing this new modem on every new iPhone as they update it over the next year or so. So major shift for Apple, even though that's not getting a lot of attention, that's what we should be focusing on because it means even if you buy the cheapest phone that Apple sells, your battery's going to last a lot longer than it did last year.
So this is a budget, if you will, introduction for them? This is the cheapest priced iPhone you can buy right now?
It is. It starts at $899 Canadian, which is a lot more than the SE used to sell for. It was $579, so a $300 plus bump. But it's a much more capable device. What's interesting about it is it will run Apple Intelligence. It has the latest A18 chip. It has the latest technology. It's cheaper than other iPhones, but they definitely didn't cheap out on the specs, which means you don't have to look like you bought the device when you show up at your next party or you show up at the office. You can pull it out and not be embarrassed by it.
If you were going to buy an iPhone now, why not just spring for this instead of like buying a new iPhone 16? What are you losing in terms of functionality or capability here?
Camera's a little bit less capable. It still has the notch. It doesn't have the dynamic island. The processor is a little bit less capable. It has fewer what are called GPUs. So if you play games a lot, you might notice the difference. And of course, but from where I sit, the battery lasts longer. It's 26 hours of watching video end to end instead of 22 on an iPhone 16. So it's cheaper, but it lasts longer. So for a lot of people, that might be enough. And it also means if you're the kind of person who buys a phone, you don't want to spend a lot of money on it, but you want it to last a few years, having a more capable battery right off the hop means that you're going to be able to keep that device with confidence. It's a better value proposition in many ways than the more expensive iPhones.
Okay. Only $899. Okay.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of money, and it
is.
It's more than it used to be, but at the same time, a lot less than you can spend. And increasingly, because of the economy, a lot of people are going, I want to spend less on a phone. I don't want to go right into full budget territory because that's too much of a compromise. This is the most important device that I have. It's the one that I use the most. This might hit the absolute sweet spot for the market. I think Apple is onto something here. We're going to see a lot of other Android devices that mimic that strategy over the next few months.
Let me get to this last story about on Instagram testing a dislike button. How's this going to work, and what's the point here?
So basically, if you don't like something, if you're reading someone's comments or someone's post or something they've posted in a reel, you can, instead of liking it, you can dislike it, and they will see that it has been disliked, but it won't show. There won't be like a number, this is how many dislikes that we've seen. It gives you feedback into whether you're hitting the mark or not, and it kind of adds another sort of way of privately knowing if your messages are finding their target. Right now, it's just a test. It has not been rolled out globally, but the intent is they'll test it smaller, and then it'll gradually appear on all of our feeds over the next few months.
Okay. I was reading a thing, not to do with this, but, this whole idea of like and dislike, and I was reading something that was posted, and people nowadays will comment on anything and everything, and I'm wondering, maybe we've reached that time when, for some stories or some sites, maybe you don't need to have comments.
Oh, yeah. And in fact, the news industry in particular, if you look at most news or media websites, they got rid of their comment sections years ago for exactly that same reason, because it wasn't productive. It was, you would post something and then very quickly it would descend into basically anarchy. And so I think social media has followed that lead. It's gone in that direction. It almost hurts my heart some days when I see the comment section below a lot of things that are posted. And I think this is probably another sign that maybe we have better things to do with our time. Let's back away from the comment section a little bit, maybe spend a little bit less time doom scrolling and, feeling like we need to interact with everything online. Social media, if we use it in that way, it's a lot less social than we thought it should be. And I think maybe something needs to change, particularly around the way we use it.
Agreed. Carmi, Levy. Carmi, thanks so much.
Because you don't want to miss a thing. Montreal Now on CJAD 800.
Dr. Joe Schwarz is going to join us right now. He, of course, is the host of the Dr. Joe Show here on CJAD. That, of course, is Sundays at 3, and director of the McGill Office for Science and Society. And Dr. Joe, I'm interested to hear what you have to say, because the first headline is wellness influencers. So I'm guessing there are thousands of them. They seem to be, at least on social media, there's like a new one every other day.
There are. And, this is a term that it's relatively novel, although, of course, people who have tried to influence wellness and health have, been around time immemorial. But today it's become a profession on social media. And these people who basically, promote the pursuit of optimal health and vitality, there's nothing wrong with that. But the money that they make is absolutely amazing. I just came across that. Michelle Lewin, who I had not heard of before, actually, but she turns out to be a Venezuelan fitness guru. She has 16.2 million followers, and she makes $42,400 per post. Can you imagine that? Every time that she posts something on the internet, she makes $42,000. Others are in the same category, $21,000, $20,000, which is just amazing. Now, of course, the question is, do these people really deserve that kind of money? Well, these wellness influencers are easily divided into categories. The fitness ones, who mostly promote just exercise, generally are pretty good scientifically. But the ones that then start to produce food, promote foods and supplements of all kinds, that's a different story. And that is very lucrative. Gwyneth Paltrow, of course, is a classic example. Gwyneth was a very good actress, if you remember seeing her in Shakespeare in Love, right?
Sideways.
She was good. And then she decided that she would go the health route. And all of a sudden, oregano oil wards off colds, magnesium pills ensure sleep. You should be spraying your body with colloidal silver to stave off germs. You should be eating daikon, which is a type of Japanese radish, for stomach aches. And then she tells us other ingenious things about gluten. She says, every single nutritionist, doctor, and health-conscious person I've ever come across seems to concur that gluten is tough on the system, and many of us are at best intolerant of it and worse, allergic to it. Total nonsense. People who have celiac disease, of course, have to be very careful with gluten, but it is not an allergen, and most people are not intolerant of it. But, she's very charming, and she's a pretty woman, and she gets a lot of media attention. And then we have people like Anthony William. You ever heard of him? He's the medical medium. He has written New York Times bestsellers books. He has a radio show in Florida in which he answers medical questions. He has no medical degree. He has no scientific degree of any kind. is essentially scientifically illiterate. How does he get away with doing a show on radio like that? Because he says he has a contact with spirits. And there's a spirit doctor that actually gives him advice. And he just translates the advice that he hears from the spirits to people on the radio. That advice is almost always to drink celery juice. That's apparently what the spirit doctor thinks is the best thing. Now, how does he get away with this and not be accused of practicing medicine without a license? Because the advice isn't coming from him.
It's coming from the spirit, I see.
World. Uh-huh. Isn't that quite unbelievable?
Although, truth be told, there's nothing wrong with drinking celery juice.
Nothing wrong with drinking celery juice. Interesting enough, celery juice is used as an additive in hot dogs and ham because people are so concerned about nitrates as additives in those processed meats because they've heard that the nitrates convert to nitrosamines in their system, and that's a carcinogen. It's a legitimate concern. But celery juice is actually high in nitrates, naturally occurring, which is why they use it in hot dogs. And even the hot dog can then declare no nitrates added because they're not adding nitrates, they're adding celery juice that contains nitrates.
Okay. Although you're supposed to say, but you'd be just as good or better off eating the celery instead of just drinking the celery juice.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, this celery is fine as a vegetable. Eat it if you like it. Juice it if you like it. But
it's unlikely to change your life.
Your disease.
Okay.
Another one that I've come across, which is a very interesting one, is Jordan Younger. She was very popular as the blonde vegan. She promoted a gluten-free, sugar-free, oil-free, grain-free, legume-free, dairy-free diet. She sold blueberry cocktails in order to cleanse your body, as a body cleanse. And then, believe it or not, she got sick from being on such a diet. Mm-hmm. She wasn't getting enough protein in her diet. And then she revealed how she got sick, and she ditched this vegan diet. Oh. And she then began to promote a much more balanced diet. And believe it or not, she got all kinds of complaints from people who had been her followers as a promoter of vegan diet, claiming that she had sold out. And there were death threats against her because she had given up
blueberries.
And then she has reinvented herself now as the balanced blonde. So now she promotes a pretty balanced diet, but she has also discovered that she has psychic abilities. And she now promotes herself as a psychic and a healer and a light worker, whatever that may be. And a visionary.
Does she hear from a spirit as well, or is that the other guy's shtick?
That's the other guy's shtick. I'm not sure. I mean, if she says that she's got psychic talent,
right?
Maybe that involves, the same kind of nonsense. And then there were sisters in England, the Hemsley sisters, who were very, very big because they promoted an astrologically farmed vegetable diet. Bone broth, agave nectar, no dairy, no gluten, and no protein and carbohydrate eaten together. They were doing very well, but they are no longer together. I think they split because now they have different ideas on what wellness promoter should be doing.
Okay.
And, this brings up a notion of orthorexia. Which we are now seeing. Orthorexia is the obsessive behavior in pursuit of a healthy diet. And, of course, we're all looking for healthy diets. And we know that, the diets that are mostly plant-based are the healthiest diets. But there are people who take this to an extreme and, worry about, whether or not there may be somehow some animal product that has gotten into their diet that then is acting like a poison. We know that diet is important. I mean, there's no question. We are what we eat, right? Food is the only thing that goes into our body. So we are made of food. But some people do just develop this obsessive attention to every morsel that they eat. And that's called orthorexia.
Okay. Joe, we got to leave it there. This is fascinating. And maybe next week when we do this or whenever we do it next, I want to ask you something that I remember from 20 years ago, just as you were talking now. Remember a book called The Zone Diet?
Oh, sure.
Great. We can talk about that next because I want to know what you think about that. Dr. Joe Schwarz, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
This has been the Montreal Now podcast.
Listen live on your radio weekday afternoons from 2 to 6
on CJAD 800
or through the iHeartRadio app.